What happens when calm journalism meets royal arrogance? In just 15 minutes, what began as a polite conversation in a quiet, elegant studio would spiral into a televised standoff, one that even Tucker Carlson himself hadn't seen coming. No audience, no laughter, no commercial breaks. Just two men sitting across from each other in a softly lit room, and the unmistakable crackle of tension building between every word. Prince Harry had agreed to sit down with Tucker to set the record straight. But from the moment the cameras started rolling, it was clear this wasn't going to be an ordinary interview. The studio had been designed to look intimate. Warm lighting, a fireplace flickering faintly in the background, deep mahogany bookshelves lined with framed photos and leather-bound volumes. Tucker Carlson sat comfortably in his chair, posture straight, expression calm but alert. Across from him, Prince Harry leaned back slightly, one ankle resting on his knee, his jaw set tight, his eyes scanning the room as though bored already. "Your Royal Highness," Tucker began with his familiar measured tone, "thank you for joining us. It's been quite some time since you've done a one-on-one interview like this. What made you decide to speak out now?" Harry gave a half smile, one of those smiles that never reach the eyes. "Well, Tucker, maybe because I finally decided to waste an evening doing something beneath me." Tucker blinked once, a pause, a soft chuckle, polite but not amused. "I see," he said, nodding slightly. "Well, I appreciate you making the time, regardless." Harry tilted his head. "Yes, I'm sure you do." Already the temperature in the room seemed to drop. Tucker leaned forward slightly, maintaining composure. "Let's start with something simple. You've spoken often about wanting a private life, away from the scrutiny of the media. But at the same time, you've written books, filmed documentaries, and sat for interviews like this one. How do you reconcile those two things?" Harry gave a small, theatrical sigh. "You journalists all love that question, don't you? It's like you can't imagine a world where someone might want to control their own story. Privacy doesn't mean silence, Tucker. It means boundaries, something you lot seem to have trouble understanding." Tucker nodded slowly. "That's fair. But would you agree that being a public figure makes some level of attention inevitable?" Harry gave a short, cold laugh. "You're American. You wouldn't understand the concept of royalty even if it hit you in the face." The tension in the room thickened. Tucker didn't flinch. "Perhaps not," he said calmly. "But I do understand hypocrisy." Harry's eyes flicked up sharply. "Excuse me?" "You've accused the press of exploitation," Tucker said evenly. "But you've also made millions sharing personal stories, sometimes about your own family. Some might say, that's a contradiction." Harry smiled again, this time mockingly. "And some might say, American journalists make careers pretending to care about truth. Look at you, Tucker, sitting there in your expensive suit, pretending to be a man of the people." Tucker's lips tightened slightly, but his voice remained composed. "That's an interesting point. Do you feel that being misunderstood gives you license to be dismissive?" Harry's smirk deepened. "No, it gives me license to be honest, something your kind rarely tries." For a few seconds the only sound was the quiet hum of the studio lights. The crew behind the cameras exchanged nervous glances. Tucker's pen hovered above his notepad, then lowered. "All right," Tucker said quietly. "Let's talk about your book for a moment. In it, you described intimate details about your time in the royal family, private conversations, even personal arguments. Do you think that was fair to the people involved?" Harry leaned forward slightly, his tone now openly condescending. "Fair? You Americans love that word. Fair is for playgrounds and courtrooms. I told my truth. If people can't handle that, perhaps they should have treated me better." Tucker didn't respond immediately. His eyes studied Harry's face, a man who had clearly rehearsed his defiance. "You know," Tucker said finally, "I've interviewed politicians, soldiers, presidents, even dictators. Most of them were defensive. But you're the first to seem proud of being offended." Harry's expression hardened. "And you're the first journalist I've met who confuses curiosity with arrogance." Tucker smiled faintly. "I think that's our first disagreement of the evening." Harry shrugged. "Oh, I doubt it'll be the last." The exchange hung in the air, sharp and uncomfortable. Tucker flipped to the next page of his notes, but didn't glance down. Let's talk about responsibility then, he continued smoothly. You've spoken about mental health, about breaking cycles of trauma. Admirable goals, truly. But many critics argue that your actions, particularly the public airing of family issues, have created new wounds instead of healing old ones. How do you respond to that? Harry gave a theatrical roll of his eyes. Critics? You mean tabloids with microphones? I don't respond to bottom feeders. Tucker raised an eyebrow. You're speaking to one right now, aren't you? Harry hesitated, caught for half a second before leaning back again. I said what I said. Tucker set his pen down gently. You realize this interview was supposed to be a chance for you to present your side in your own words, but so far, all we've heard are insults. Maybe your questions deserve them, Harry replied coolly. The corner of Tucker's mouth twitched. Well, he said softly, then I suppose we'll see if the viewers agree. Harry smiled smugly, mistaking Tucker's patience for weakness, the kind of smile that said he thought he'd won the room. But Tucker's eyes, calm, unwavering, told another story. He wasn't losing his cool, not yet, but it was clear he was taking mental notes, one for each sneer and smirk. And by the time the interview reached its second half, that patience would begin to run out. The tension that had started as subtle friction was now visible. You could feel it in the silence between questions, the kind of silence that wasn't comfortable but calculated. The crew behind the cameras barely moved. Tucker Carlson sat upright, his calm exterior unshaken, though his pen tapped softly against his notebook, a quiet tell of frustration contained. Prince Harry, on the other hand, looked relaxed, too relaxed, one leg draped over the other, his tone carrying the smugness of someone who believed he was untouchable. Tucker leaned slightly forward. Let's talk about your time in California. You've spoken about finding peace there, starting over. Do you think that distance from the UK helped you gain perspective? Harry gave a small chuckle. Perspective? Oh, Tucker, I didn't need to move across the Atlantic to get perspective. I needed to get away from parasites with microphones and cameras. Tucker's eyes flickered upward. That's a strong word. Is it? Harry asked, his voice dripping with mock surprise. Because that's what the media is. Parasites. They feed, they spin, they drain, and they call it journalism. And now, apparently, they invite me to talk about healing while sharpening their knives. Tucker didn't react immediately. He simply crossed one leg over the other and said quietly, You know, for someone who despises the media, you spend a remarkable amount of time talking to them. Harry smirked. I talk when I choose to, on my terms, not on the terms of people who twist everything I say for clicks and outrage. That's interesting, Tucker said, because you came here willingly, and yet you seem to think this is an ambush. Harry's eyebrows lifted. Well, you're Tucker Carlson, aren't you? Ambush journalism is practically your brand. The words landed like a slap, but Tucker's composure didn't crack. He smiled, a small, restrained curve of the mouth that was both disarming and dangerous. If you believed that, he said, you wouldn't have accepted the invitation. Harry leaned forward slightly, his tone sharpened. Maybe I came here to see what it's like to be interrogated by America's most overrated commentator. The crew shifted uncomfortably. Someone coughed. Tucker didn't blink. And maybe, he said evenly, you came here because deep down, you crave attention from the very machine you claim to despise. For the first time, Harry hesitated. Not for long, but long enough for the cameras to catch the flicker of irritation in his eyes. That's ridiculous, he snapped. You think you know me? You don't know anything about what I've lived through. Tucker's tone softened, but only slightly. Then help us understand. You've spoken about trauma, about feeling trapped in the royal system, but some people would say you've traded one kind of spotlight for another, one where you control the lighting. Harry gave a low, humorless laugh. You think I enjoy this? Sitting here answering the same tired questions from men who've never faced half the pressure I've lived with since birth? I think you enjoy control, Tucker said calmly. And I think when you don't have it, you get angry. Harry's jaw tightened. You really should try another line of work, Tucker. Psychology clearly isn't your strong suit. I don't need a degree, Tucker replied, his tone cool. Just a memory. You've spent the past decade talking about how unfairly the press treats you, but You seem perfectly fine, profiting from it when it suits you. Harry leaned back, crossing his arms, his voice sharp and dismissive. Oh, come on. Don't act like you care about moral consistency. You thrive on conflict. You need people like me to keep your show relevant. And you, Tucker countered gently, seem to need interviews like this to remind people you're still relevant. The silence that followed was suffocating. Even the faint hum of the studio lights seemed to fade. Harry gave a tight, humorless smile. You think you're clever, don't you? I think I'm doing my job, Tucker replied simply. Harry exhaled slowly, his eyes narrowing. Your job is to provoke. You're not interested in truth. You're interested in humiliation. That's what you people do best. I ask questions, Tucker said, unflinching. You don't like them, so you call it humiliation. Harry's tone grew louder, more aggressive. You're twisting my words, and you know it. That's why interviews like this are pointless. You think you can win arguments by being smug. Tucker remained utterly calm. And you think you can win them by playing the victim. Harry stood suddenly, pacing slightly in front of the chair. I'm not playing anything, he said, his voice sharp. You think this is some game, don't you? You think you're the clever American dismantling the poor royal's ego. I don't think that, Tucker said quietly. But I do think you've mistaken accountability for persecution. Harry turned toward him sharply. Accountability? You're talking to me about accountability? You're sitting there in your studio empire lecturing me about privilege? Tucker tilted his head slightly, his voice almost gentle now. Yes, because you seem to think yours exempts you from respect. For a long second, Harry didn't respond. His breathing was heavier, his expression hardened into a glare. Tucker leaned back in his chair. You wanted to tell your story, he said softly. But so far, all you've done is attack anyone who asks you to explain it. Harry's lips curled into a sneer. Maybe because most people don't deserve my explanations. There it was, the arrogance laid bare. Tucker gave a small nod, almost to himself. Well, he said after a pause, that's certainly one way to look at it. Harry smirked, mistaking restraint for retreat. You see, Tucker, the difference between you and me is that I don't need people to like me. Tucker's eyes met his. No, he said evenly. But you desperately need them to listen. And just like that, the temperature in the room seemed to drop another 10 degrees. The cameras were still rolling, but everyone in the control booth could feel it. The air had changed. Tucker's voice remained steady, professional, but his eyes told another story. Patience was thinning, and Prince Harry seemed determined to push it until it snapped. Harry leaned back again, his tone dripping with smugness. You know, Tucker, you keep asking these little moral questions like you're the conscience of the world, but you're just another media man chasing ratings. Be honest with yourself for once. Tucker's expression didn't change. He kept his gaze fixed on Harry, chin slightly tilted down, the calm authority of a man who'd handled 100 difficult guests, but none quite this entitled. Ratings don't excuse behavior, Tucker said quietly. Neither does privilege. I'm simply giving you the chance to clarify what you believe. Harry gave a soft laugh. Oh, please. You think this is about beliefs? You think I came here to be cross-examined by a man who made his career stirring up outrage? I came because my team thought it would be amusing. The remark landed like a punch. The sound technician visibly winced. Tucker, however, only leaned forward slightly, resting his elbows on his knees. Amusing, he repeated. So you're saying this entire conversation, your opportunity to explain yourself to millions of people, is just a joke to you? Harry smirked, eyes half-lidded with mock boredom. Well, I assumed you'd have the decency to ask intelligent questions. I see I was mistaken. For a second, Tucker simply stared at him, not angrily, but with that quiet, devastating stillness that precedes a storm. Then, he smiled faintly. Let's try an intelligent one then, he said, voice as smooth as glass. What responsibility do you take for the damage you've caused to your own family's reputation? Harry's posture stiffened. Excuse me? You've accused them publicly of racism, of manipulation, of neglect, Tucker continued evenly. Do you believe your public accusations have helped bring understanding, or just more division? Harry let out a short, incredulous laugh. You really think I'm the problem here? You're unbelievable. Do you have any idea what I've lived through? The trauma, the constant invasion. Tucker nodded once. Yes, and I've acknowledged that. But it's also fair to ask if sharing those grievances for profit might undermine your own message. Harry's face darkened. Profit? You think I did this for money? That's absurd. You've made millions, Tucker said softly. From books, interviews, documentaries, all based on the same theme, the pain you've endured. Some might see that as monetizing your suffering. Harry leaned forward sharply, his tone suddenly venomous. And some might see your entire career as monetizing division. Don't pretend you're better than me. Tucker didn't blink. I don't. But I also don't call that honesty when it's convenient and hypocrisy when it's not. Harry glared at him, jaw tight, breathing shallow. You really think you can talk down to me because you've got a microphone and an American flag behind your name? I think, Tucker replied calmly, that everyone sitting in this room can see who's talking down to whom. Harry's mouth opened slightly in disbelief. You're twisting everything I say. No, Tucker said, his tone still measured, but now colder, harder. You're saying everything you mean. The crew held their breath. Harry's composure was unraveling fast. He stood again, his hand slicing through the air. You journalists are all the same. You think you can trap me with your smug little questions? You don't understand what real pressure is. Tucker didn't move. He simply looked up at Harry, calm as ever. Pressure is keeping composure when someone insults you on camera. You should try it. Harry froze. For the first time, the facade cracked. His lips parted, his eyes flashing fury. You think you're clever, Tucker. You think you can humiliate me like you do your political guests. But you don't get to do that to me. I'm not trying to humiliate you, Tucker said, voice low. I'm trying to have a civil conversation. But you seem allergic to civility. Harry's fists clenched. You're patronizing me. I'm restraining myself, Tucker corrected. The silence was deafening. A producer in the corner mouthed, cut the feed, but Tucker didn't. He wanted to finish this properly. He took a slow breath, his next words careful, deliberate. You came here, Prince Harry, claiming to want to speak your truth. But truth doesn't need hostility. It doesn't need contempt. It needs clarity. And so far, I haven't heard a single thing that resembles it. Harry laughed bitterly. You wouldn't recognize truth if it hit you in the face. And yet, Tucker said, eyes narrowing slightly, I seem to be the only one not hiding behind it. Harry pointed at him suddenly, anger fully unleashed. You're twisting my words on purpose. You invited me here just to make a fool of me. Tucker tilted his head slightly, unbothered. No, you're doing that part all by yourself. A beat of silence, then another. Harry's nostrils flared. You're done, Tucker. I'll make sure people see this for what it is. An ambush, an attack, a disgrace. Tucker slowly stood, his calm unshaken. He adjusted his cufflinks, straightened his tie, and met Harry's furious stare with a faint, steady smile. If it's an ambush, Your Royal Highness, it's one you walked into with a crown of arrogance. Harry took a step forward. You... Tucker raised a hand. No, stop. Don't. You've said enough. For a long moment, they stood there, one seething with anger, the other radiating quiet control. The lights burned brighter, and the silence felt endless. Then Tucker spoke again, voice lower now. I think that's enough for tonight. We'll take a short break. The cameras cut, but the tension didn't. Harry exhaled sharply, muttering under his breath. You'll regret this. Tucker glanced to the side, then back at him. I doubt it. And as the floor manager called for a reset, everyone in the studio knew the next part of the interview wouldn't be a continuation. It would be an ending. The studio air was still heavy when the cameras came back on. The producers had debated cutting the segment entirely, but Tucker Carlson had waved them off. He wanted it finished, properly, and on his terms. The audience wouldn't see the tension in the room, but they would feel it. Harry sat back down reluctantly, his posture stiff, his eyes glinting with contained irritation. Tucker, in contrast, looked composed as ever. He rested his hands on his knees, his voice cool and precise. Welcome back, Tucker began, his tone steady. We're here with Prince Harry, discussing life beyond the royal family, public perception, and what freedom really means. Harry gave a faint, mocking smile. Freedom? Is that what we're calling this now? Sitting here being interrogated by someone who thinks civility equals compliance? Tucker didn't react to the jab. Civility, he said calmly, is just the ability to disagree without losing control. Harry scoffed. Control? You mean pretending? Acting polite while you twist everything into some cheap headline? That's your job, isn't it? I report, Tucker replied. I don't perform. Harry leaned forward, his tone dripping with disdain. Oh, come on. You and your audience live for performance. You want outrage, not honesty. You don't want answers, you want a villain. And today, it's me. Tucker gave a faint smile. You're doing a fine job of playing that part all by yourself. The words hit harder than he expected. Harry froze for half a second before laughing bitterly. You're unbelievable. You think I care what you or your viewers think of me? No, Tucker said softly. That's the problem. Harry's jaw tightened. Excuse me? Tucker leaned in, slightly, his voice lower now, controlled but sharp. You've spent years telling the world that you're misunderstood, that you're hounded, that you're tired of being the victim. But here you are again, in front of cameras, turning every reasonable question into an attack. You say you want empathy, but you show none. You demand respect, but you give none. Harry blinked rapidly, his expression a mix of disbelief and anger. You don't get to lecture me about respect. You've built a career out of tearing people apart. Tucker didn't blink. And you've built one out of blaming everyone else for your choices. For a brief moment, Harry seemed speechless. His lips parted, but no words came out. The silence stretched thin. The only sound was the faint buzz of the studio lights. Finally, Harry straightened, trying to recover his composure. You think you're so righteous, don't you? Sitting there pretending to be the voice of truth. But you're just another media vulture. You've never lived through what I've lived through. You've never had your life picked apart by strangers. Tucker nodded. You're right, I haven't. But most people watching this haven't either, and they still manage to treat others with basic decency. Harry's face flushed. You're twisting this entire thing. You invited me here just to insult me. Tucker exhaled slowly. I invited you here to talk. You turned it into a spectacle. You think I care? Harry snapped. I don't owe you, or anyone, anything. No, Tucker said, voice even. You owe yourself some honesty. Harry laughed sarcastically. Oh, that's rich, coming from you. Tucker straightened in his chair, his tone now firmer. You came here under the pretense of wanting a conversation, but every time I've tried to give you one, you've chosen arrogance instead. You've insulted me, my team, and even the viewers at home who took time out of their day to listen to you. That's not honesty, that's entitlement. Harry's hands clenched into fists on his knees. Don't you dare lecture me about entitlement. Then stop proving me right, Tucker replied calmly. For a few moments neither spoke. The silence was deafening. Tucker could see the camera light blinking red, the live broadcast indicator still burning bright. He made his choice. He looked straight into the camera. I think it's time we wrap this up, he said, his tone calm but resolute. We value open conversation on this program, but we also value respect. And when that respect disappears, so does the point of the discussion. Harry turned sharply toward him. What's that supposed to mean? It means, Tucker said, turning to face him, this interview is over. Harry blinked. You're ending it? Yes, Tucker said, standing. Because this isn't productive anymore. I've given you every opportunity to speak your mind. But all you've done is insult everyone in the room. That's not dialogue. It's self-indulgence. And I won't be part of it. Harry's expression twisted with indignation. You can't just cut me off. I just did, Tucker replied simply. The producers in the booth froze. The crew didn't dare move. The tension was electric. Harry rose from his chair, towering slightly, but looking anything but powerful. You'll regret this, he said, his voice low and angry. People will see exactly what you did. Tucker's tone didn't waver. I didn't do anything, Your Royal Highness. I just let you speak. Harry's nostrils flared. You're pathetic. Perhaps, Tucker said with a faint smile, but I'm not the one walking out of another interview in anger. Harry glared at him for a long moment, then yanked off his microphone, the wire snapping loose. "You're a disgrace," he spat before storming toward the exit. "Good evening," Tucker said to the camera, his tone steady. "We'll be right back after the break." The red light faded. Silence fell. The crew exhaled all at once, the release of pressure almost audible. Tucker sat back down, rubbing his temples briefly before looking up at the floor manager. "Cut it clean," he said quietly. "No dramatics, just end it where it ends." The producer hesitated. "Tucker, that was—" "I know," he interrupted softly. "Just leave it. The footage speaks for itself." Minutes later, the studio was quiet except for the faint hum of equipment cooling down. Tucker stood by the window, staring out into the night. The city lights reflected faintly off the glass, glimmering like faraway stars. He'd done hundreds of interviews, faced politicians, activists, and world leaders. But this one was different. This one hadn't been about politics or policy. It had been about something simpler, uglier, ego. He picked up his notepad, flipping through the scribbled questions that would now never be answered. Then he closed it and said to no one in particular, "That's what happens when power meets a mirror." Back in the editing room, a young assistant replayed the final moments. The look on Tucker's face, calm but unyielding, and Harry's exit, sharp and explosive. It was the kind of moment that television never forgets. Not because it was sensational, but because it was honest. When the segment finally aired, it trended within hours. The headlines were predictable. Tucker shuts down, royal meltdown, Prince Harry storms out, an interview gone wrong. But beyond the noise, one truth remained clear. Civility had won the day. And that's where this story ends. Not with a shout, but with a choice. A reminder that composure under pressure is more powerful than any outburst. If you enjoyed this story, hit like, subscribe for more dramatic interview showdowns, and tell us in the comments, whose side would you have been? On